The single most powerful asset that you can build around your product is not a better ad, it's not lower prices, and it's not even necessarily a better product, it is a world. The brands that understood this are dominating their categories right now. Oatly, Graza, Poppi, Tony's Chocolonely. They all did one thing that most founders never do. They stopped selling a product and they started building a world around it. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 4 pillars behind how that actually gets done. By the end, you're going to know exactly what separates brands that own their category from brands that are stuck competing on price. But just a quick intro to myself, my name is Nabi. I'm a brand strategist. I've broken down hundreds of the strategies behind category leading brands and have worked as the strategist and creative director across multiple brands for founders and teams. So if you know that you have a world-class product and your growth has plateaued, then this video is going to be the exact blueprint that you need to break that ceiling and position your brand as the obvious choice in your category. To give you an overview, there are 4 pillars: analyze, define, build, and launch. And I want you to notice something straight away. Build is number 3, not number 1. The problem is most founders go straight to build. They spend tens of thousands on a rebrand. It looks aesthetic and pretty, it gets compliments, but 6 months later, nothing has actually moved the needle in their business. And they walk away thinking that branding doesn't work. It's not that branding doesn't work, it's that they missed the 2 steps that make everything else actually mean something. So let's start at the beginning. Pillar 1. Analyze. Here is the thing that most people get wrong about brand building. They think it starts with the mood board, the colors, the logos, the color palette. But the brands that dominate their category, they didn't start with mood boards and aesthetics. They started with data. Category leaders don't just make brand decisions based on what they personally like or what looks good right now. Every single decision is grounded in insights. And that one difference between the founders that decide based on preference versus the ones that decide based on insight is one of the biggest separators between the brands that grow and the ones that stagnate. So what does this actually look like? Well, there are 2 sides to an audit: the internal and the external. Internally, you need to honestly look at what's not working inside your business right now. Is it low sales, high churn, slow sales cycles, struggling to attract the right people? Whatever it is, you need to look at the numbers without ego and pinpoint exactly where the friction is coming from. Externally, you need to assess how you're actually showing up in the real world. Ask yourself questions like, where are you showing up? Who are you speaking to? What is your customer saying? And what is going on culturally in your category right now? And here is the principle in all of this. No decision in your brand should be made until you have clarity on both of these things, the internal and the external. Because when you have that clarity, every single change that you make becomes surgical. You're no longer throwing spaghetti at the wall hoping that something works. You know exactly what to change and why. The brand Poppi is a perfect example of this. You see, Poppi famously rebranded in 2020, originally being called Mother Beverage. That decision didn't just come from someone deciding that the packaging looked a bit boring. Poppi's growth had stagnated because of how they were showing up in the market. Their packaging and their original name was confusing their target audience around their products. Based on those insights, the brand executed a total makeover, from repositioning to renaming the brand to completely overhauling the packaging. The result of the pivot exploded their annual revenue from $4 million to over $500 million, and even led to an acquisition from PepsiCo for $1.9 billion in 2025. So I want you to ask yourself this: do you actually know what's not working in your brand right now and why? Or are you still making brand decisions based on your personal preferences? Because before you go and change anything, you need to know the answer to that question. Now, before we go into pillar 2, for the next month from when this video is uploaded, I am personally offering video brand audits for founders looking to rebrand. I will look into your current brand world and pinpoint 2 to 3 specific problems for you. This won't be for everyone, just click the second link in my bio and see if you qualify. Okay, cool. So pillar 2 is define. So you've done the audit, you know what's not working, so now you have to define 2 things: who you're speaking to and why you exist as a brand. The problem is most brands stay completely surface level on both. They think they know the customer, they think they have a mission, but when you actually push on it, it's vague. And vague brands get ignored. So let's start with your who. Understanding your customer is not just knowing their age or where they live or their job title. That is the surface. To actually build a world that they want to belong to, then you need to understand them like a crazy person at an obsessive level. So let me actually break this down for you. Your customer's surface level need is what they say they want. For example, they might tell you that they're going to the gym to lift weights, to exercise. The deeper level need is understanding how your product will make them feel. Using that same example, lifting weights might give them more clarity and help them feel less stressed. This is the deeper frustration. This is the fear that they might not admit themselves, but it is the emotional layer underneath. But the deepest level, and this is the level that most brands never get to, is understanding who that person is trying to become. For example, the gym giving them more clarity and feeling less stressed might help them step into becoming a high-performing entrepreneur. This is the version of themselves that they are trying to become. Now I want you to zoom out from that and just imagine only speaking to the surface level need. You would be positioning around the exercising and the lifting weights, instead of what the person truly wants and values the most, which is the identity. The brands that successfully make themselves the obvious choice all feel like they were specifically made for you, because they're speaking to the person that you're trying to become, not just what you say you need on the surface. And here is why this matters beyond messaging. The more specific your avatar, the sharper your messaging. The sharper your messaging, the lower your acquisition costs. The lower your acquisition costs, the more you can actually scale. So I want you to ask yourself these questions. Are you speaking to everyone? Are you speaking to someone specific? Do you actually know who your customer is trying to become, or do you only know what they say they want? Now, the second part of define is your why, your point of view as a brand. The way you get people to genuinely buy into your brand, whether it's potential customers, partners, investors, isn't by talking about your product, it's by leading with a point of view. The problem is most brands don't have a clear point of view. They just talk about themselves, their aesthetic, how long they've been in business, their products, and then they wonder why people don't really care, why investors don't see the value, and why ultimately people don't buy into the brand. When Oatly rebranded, they didn't just sell oat milk, they sold a point of view. Oatly's values were transparency, planet first, and disruption to traditional systems. Their mission was to drive a global shift towards healthy, sustainable, plant-based eating. Their common enemy with their audience was the powerful dairy industry and its high environmental footprint. The original story was about Swedish food scientists who invented oat milk to fight against dairy allergies. When your brand has a clear point of view that it can lead with, it stops being just another product and it starts becoming a movement that people can buy into and rally behind. The reframe that I want you to have here is this: stop leading with your product and start leading with a clear point of view. So to define your brand's point of view, start by asking yourself this: what real problems were you seeing in your category? What or who is your brand's enemy and why? To help you with this is the thing that your customer already feels strong frustration towards, and it's getting in the way of their desired identity. And in opposition to that enemy, what values do you have and how do you do things differently as a brand? Now moving on to pillar 3 is build. Now you have your audit, you know what's not working, you've defined your avatar at depth and you have a clear point of view. Now you actually have the foundations to actually build your brand world. Your brand's world takes shape across 3 things: personality, visual world, and real world alignment. Personality is the characteristics and voice of your brand. How does it sound? If they're a person, how would they act? And again, defining these things for your brand isn't going to be just a personal preference decision. Your POV is going to define exactly how you should show up as a brand. Your visual world is your visual identity, your logo system, your color palette, your typography, your packaging. And I want to be clear on this because there is a big misconception when it comes to design. Design isn't decoration. Every visual decision that you make as a brand is either reinforcing your positioning or contradicting it. So you cannot afford to just pick random colors, random fonts based on what just looks good to you. It always has to reflect back to making your point of view clear as a brand. For example, Oatly's visual world is deliberately weird, handwritten, and almost kind of uncomfortable in its style. This wasn't just a random design decision. It was a visual reinforcement of their point of view as a brand. Lastly, real world alignment is where your brand actually shows up in the real world. What environments, what activities, what habits are you connecting your product to? The goal is for your brand to show up in the places that your target audience wants to be a part of. For example, Nike doesn't just show up in corporate boardrooms or white space studios or on bedroom floors. They show up specifically in real world sports locations. Tennis courts, basketball courts, athletic tracks, boxing gyms. They show up with athletes and runners. When your personality, your visual world, and your real world alignment are all pulling in the same direction, your brand actually starts to feel like a real place. And real places are hard to leave. So I want you to ask yourself this: are you designing from personal preference, or are you designing from a clear point of view and insights? Do you have an actual brand system or just a logo? Do you know where your brand should actually show up in the real world? And finally, pillar 4 is launch. Building your brand world isn't the finish line. How you roll it out defines whether or not it actually works. And there's 2 parts to this: the internal rollout and the external. The internal rollout is crucial. Your team, your salespeople, your partners all need to understand the new brand world before it goes anywhere near the public. Because if your internal team just takes your new brand and starts applying it inconsistently, then the whole system just breaks. You end up with different messaging in your ads, your content, your packaging, and your sales conversations. Category leaders do not just build a brand and hope that their team gets it. They create systems, trainings, they align people before anything goes live. Then there's the external rollout. Short term, this is making sure that all your touch points are overhauled with your new identity and making sure the narrative behind your rebrand brand is clear for the public. You don't want people to misinterpret your rebrand and create their own narrative, so just define it first and make it clear. Long term, this is your content, your campaigns, and how you measure your brand's impact over time. And here is where most founders go wrong. They build the brand, but then their content completely undermines their positioning. They chase random trends, they try to show up everywhere with anyone, and then the overall messaging of the brand becomes confused. So the target audience that the brand built itself to attract doesn't connect with what they're seeing, so they move on. Category leaders do not chase random trends. They consistently show up in places and with people who align with their brand's point of view. They design their content and campaigns to amplify their point of view, not confuse it. Apple is a perfect example of this in action. Apple is precise about who their product shows up with. They choose people and places who reinforce the exact associations and feelings that they want you to feel. And long term, you need to be measuring the impact of your brand's world, not through compliments, not through likes. Brand is measured over the long term through its downstream effects. Your sales cycle length, your hiring quality, your investor conversations, your customer LTV. Category leading brands don't just rebrand themselves to look pretty and move on. They track it over time. They analyze, they know what's working and what's not. So ask yourself this: if your brand launched this week, would your team know exactly what it stands for? And does the world that you're building it into reflect the world that your customer already lives in? So let's bring all of this together. Analyze. Understand what's not working before you touch anything. Internal and external. Define. Get specific about who you're speaking to at depth and get clear on exactly what your brand stands for and stands against. Build. Create a consistent world across your personality, your visual identity, and your real world presence. And launch. Roll out with intention, align your team, control the narrative, and measure it over time. Doing all these 4 things properly is what takes a brand struggling to stand out, competing on price, to being positioned as the obvious choice in their category, with die-hard fans and a premium position in their space. Now let me take a guess about where this is going to go. You're going to go look for an agency to help you build this. But what you're going to find is that most agencies are only going to help you with one part. They'll do the design and they'll do a good job of making things look good, but they won't help you analyze anything. They won't help you define anything. They won't support the rollout that will actually make it work. And you're ultimately going to be left with piecing every single thing yourself. And this is exactly why most rebrands are built to fail, because your brand has to be built alongside a clear strategy. If you just build, you will end up with a pretty storefront instead of an actual growth tool. So if you are a founder and you're trying to move up market and dominate your category, but you know your growth has stalled because of your early stage branding, then I want you to click the first link in the description, which takes you to another video where I walk through my exact 4-step process, which I use to do this with founders directly. Click the link, watch the video, see if it feels like a right fit, and if it does, you can book a call to speak with me one-on-one. And for the rest of you, if this video shifted how you see your brand, or if there's anything new that you learned that surprised you, then let me know in the comments. I'm going to read all of them. Thanks for watching and goodbye.